Introduction to Arweave and the permaweb. Hi, I'm Tom Wilson, and in this workshop, we are going to learn about Arweave and the permaweb. Now, this is just an introduction, but we'll create a small svelte application and learn how to write transactions to Arweave and how to query data from Arweave by building a simple check-in app called 8pin because that is a name that was available. Cool. So this is a code along immersive workshop. So if you want to follow along, you can go to the repo on GitHub, which is linked in the description. T Wilson 63 Intro to Arweave. And we'll be using a virtual machine IDE in the cloud called Gitpod, which will allow you to essentially boot up the same environment that I'll be running without having to, um, set up everything. So Svelte will be installed, a tool called AR Local, which is kind of like a local test net of Arweave will be installed, and we'll be up and running with some, kind of default HTML. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about this app that we're going to create. We're going to create a little app called 8pin, which is a universal check-in application. You guys may have remembered back in the Web 2.0 days, an app called Foursquare, which allowed you to check in or stamp your lat and long wherever you were into a centralized server. Well, in this case, we're going to be using the Arweave, which is a decentralized blockchain-like technology. And it is a blockchain, but they kind of call it a block weave because you can store a huge amount of data in this, and it's permanent. It never goes away. You pay once and it's there. But before we start talking more about that, let's talk about the user stories that we want to work on in this app. So again, just kind of simple. We want to create a pin. So a user will be able to create a pin by grabbing their location and adding a little note and then a timestamp of the transaction. So we'll do a little bit of that. And it can't be edited or deleted. And that's why the permaweb will be a good fit. The next feature is just to list the pins by user. So we'll have another route in our app where we can list all the pins that user created. And that's what we'll do today. But you could take it further and like allow to list all the pins, all the users that pinned a given location, or you could take it a step further and query on other data as well. But we'll just filter by the user and a list of their pins. Now we're going to use the Web3 stack, and for the website we'll use Svelte, just regular Svelte, not SvelteKit. Maybe another time I'll do SvelteKit, but for now just regular Svelte, and then Arweave for the storage. And Arweave will not only store our data, but if we have time at the end, we'll actually store our app on the AR local, which is like a test net, so we won't have to spend any money. But that's kind of cool as well. So you really can deploy a full stack application using this technology without having to use anything else. There's one caveat. There's kind of DNS if you wanted to make it live and go through a gateway, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, what do we need to know in order to successfully do this workshop? Well, you'll need to know some JavaScript, have a GitHub account, HTML, CSS, a little Svelte. We're not going to do a lot of crazy Svelte, but it might help to know a little bit. And then obviously JSON and fetch. We're going to actually do some GraphQL, and then Node.js and NPM. So not a lot to know on this workshop, and hopefully you will learn some stuff. I know I did. So in order to save some time and have to, kind of bootstrap a lot of stuff, we'll use Gitpod, and we can just go ahead and open that in a new tab. And I'm going to go over to that new tab, and I'm going to continue with GitHub. And I'm going to kind of sign in with my test user. Okay. Just to make sure everything works. So while that's kind of coming to life, so what we've already done is set up a Svelte project with a local server that emulates the Arweave protocol. It's called AR local. And it's not a full Arweave kind of minor client thing. It is actually kind of a mock thing, but it'll work great for us today. Basically, we can send transactions to it, and it won't charge us anything, won't look at our balance, etc. It just approves them. Whereas when you use the real Arweave, you will need a wallet with some AR tokens in that wallet in order to do things. Not a lot. You don't need a lot, but you will need some. We'll talk about that. As far as the CSS, we're going to use MVP.css. It's kind of just a simple prototype-ish CSS framework, which is great for a project like this, and Tinrow for our routing library. The UX is already set up. Obviously, it can be improved, but we'll have two endpoints for our two user stories. One is create to create the pin, and pins to list the pins. And then finally, we'll pull in Arweave.js and place that in our public index HTML page. And basically, that's the SDK to interact with Arweave. Arweave is JSON RPC, and it just wraps it in some nice JavaScript so we can access it. And with like all kind of Web3, you will use a wallet to connect to it, and the wallet keeps your key as a user, but then it allows for the app to sign the transactions without having to ever see your key. So the app never has access to your private key, and the wallet exists as a web extension. So we'll do that. Let's see. So we got our app up, and we got AR local running. So that's all good. Let's go and check out our app. Both of those are public. So let's open our app. You can see, so our app, 8-pin, permanently drop a pin anywhere in the world forever, ever, ever, ever. Oops. And we've got two routes up here. We've got my pins, which will show all of our pins here. And I've got some just mocked out data. And then we've got create pin, which is a form. And we need to give this user the ability to grab the lat long. Let's see. Open preferences. Hopefully this won't take long. Okay, now done. So in our create pin, we get our location, and then we can add a name of a place and a note. And then hit check in. Of course, none of it's working right now, but that will basically push a transaction on Arweave. Okay, so we've got everything running. We can look at our app and let's see where do we want to start. Let's go back to our README. So a wallet. So what we want to do is use AR Connect. AR Connect is a wallet in the Arweave ecosystem. So let's go ahead and install that. And we'll add it as a Chrome extension. Add extension. And we won't worry about syncing that right now. Let's create an account. Create a new wallet. Now with AR Connect, when we create a new wallet, we'll get a seed phrase and we can download the key if we want. I'm not going to do that for this one because this is just a test wallet and I will totally throw it away at the end of this. Um, cool. So this is our seed phrase. If you create your wallet, you'll want to store that somewhere that you will not lose it. And you can download your key file as well if you want. Um, and that sets us up. Now, if we go to our extensions, we can pin AR Connect up here. And you can see we've got an account. And that's our address that we just copied. And of course, there's nothing in it. Okay, so let's bump up the font here. Um, Move that over. And let's go into create svelte. And we'll move this down. Okay, so we've got a server running on port 1984. That is what is our kind of our test net for Arweave. This will allow us to develop and test things without having to pay any kind of tokens to do transactions. It'll just allow us to do it, which is cool. And what we want to do is we want to take this address and we want to go into main here and we just want to create now this is not a great practice to do. I'm just doing it for this workshop so that you can kind of get an idea of what's going on without having uh, too many files, too many moving parts. So here we're just going to set this Arweave global on the window so that we just, like I said, don't have too many parts. With Svelte, you'd probably want to put this in a store, but this initialization phase will tell our Arweave client what server to connect to. And normally it would be, kind of arweave.net, something like that on port 443. That's the main net, or it could be another gateway. But for now, we're going to use our local AR here on port 443 and we'll save that. Pretty cool. Okay. So now we can look in our create. I'm going to go ahead and add a package called Svelte. for VS Code. So we'll get some nice color coding for our svelte. Cool. That looks better, I think. Hang on. Let's go to create. Yeah. Enable plugin. I don't want to reload the window. That's okay. Um, okay. So in our create svelte, we've got a couple of things for a form. Here's where we're getting our location. And this function submit is where we submit our form. And what we want to do is create a transaction. So what we're going to do is do const tx equals Arweave, and it's lowercase a, and we're going to say create transaction, and we're going to give it some data, and it's got to be a string, so we'll say stringify, and we'll pass in the location Latin long, and we'll pass in the name and the note for now. So that's going to be our data, and then we're going to tell Arweave what kind of type of data this is by doing an add tag of content type. So with Arweave, you can add tags, and these tags can be used to with GraphQL to filter your transaction set. So we're going to add one of application JSON, and we're going to add a tag of app and call it 8pin because that's the app. And then we'll add a tag called type and just call it a pin. And these tags can act as kind of your protocol design, or you can think of it as secondary indexes in a query. But that builds our transaction. And now what we need to do is sign the transaction. And we're going to call arweave.transactions.sign and pass in the transaction. So because we have a wallet installed, when we do Arweave transactions.sign, it's going to make sure that we've got the wallet. And if we've connected, it'll just go through. If not, it'll pop up the wallet and we'll have to log in, and then it will sign the transaction. And this way, the app will never actually see your secret. It will ask the web extension to sign it, and now you've got a signed transaction in your web app ready to go. And if you had like kind of client server, you could push that down to your server, and your server could send it to the Weave as well. So we've signed it, and now we need to post it. So we're going to do a response, await, arweave.transactions.post. Now, tx. Now, since our transaction is small, we can do .post. But if you had large files, even super large files, you want to use this bundle functionality, which we won't have time to go into on this workshop, but that's out there. So you can do large files, and you can actually bundle a bunch of transactions together and submit them as one bundled transaction, which is pretty cool. So we're going to check if it's 200, and then if not, we'll do an alert and say error, could not send to the Weave, right? Okay. So I think that's our create, right? So let's go to our app, and go create pin. We've got our lat long. Let's say, W home, hello world. Are we having fun? Then hit check in. Okay. And hopefully, since I'm connected, everything worked right, or maybe there's a bug. Let's see. tx.add tag is not a function. Okay. So let's go to my README and see what I did wrong. Arweave create transaction. Oh, I bet I forgot the wait. Let's go and see. Yes, I did. These all are promise returning. So that was the bug there. Okay. Now we will try again. Hello world. Okay. This page is requesting permission to connect to your wallet. Please review them in the pop-up. View them in the pop-up. Okay. That's the first. Okay. So I don't know if you can see my pop-up because we're doing a window, but the RConnect auth is popped up, and I'm gonna log in with my password. Okay. And then it's asking me if I want to give it permission to sign a transaction, and I'm going to say yes. And now it's running, and yay, we have completed a transaction, which is pretty cool. And that's a very simplistic way of how to post a transaction on Arweave. Now we need to get a list of transactions, and we're going to use GraphQL. Um, GraphQL is built into Arweave, so you can go to the Weave and type GraphQL, and you'll get a nice GraphQL IDE, and we can query more transactions. And if we wanted to get all the transactions, we'll get all the edges in the node and the ID. So we do this, we'll see we've got one transaction in there, which is pretty cool. If we wanted to filter the transactions, we can add parentheses here, and then we could say owners, colon, and then we could add our key, right? So we could go to AR Connect, copy our key, and if we hit run, let's see, we got to use double quotes, I think. Like that. And we get our edge. We could say owner here. Message. Should have some fields. Okay. Address. Okay. Cool. And you can see that we filtered based on an owner, and we can also filter on tags. And we'll want to say name is at, and values are 8 pin, like that. I think that's right. Cool. So that query will give us what we want for our pins. So now in order to implement that, we go to the pins.svelte page, and we need to create a function, get pins. Okay. And the first thing we're going to do is do a fetch, and we're going to need our full URL of our thing. And then we're going to add our query as a method post and a body. It'll be query and add our query here. Okay. Whew. And this query, again, since it's a string, you can make these dynamic, which we could probably just do right here. Let's just do address, right? And then up here, we could say let address equals Arweave wallet dot get active address, like that. And then that'll give us the address of the wallet that's connected to this app at that time. And then for app 8-pin, all we really need is the ID here as a result. So we'll get that back. And we need to await that fetch. Okay. And now we're going to return res.json.then, and we're going to get these results back. And what we need to do is extract the IDs out of that nested result object, and then call a get data to get the actual data for each one of those. So got like a little example here that will say dot then data, and then we'll map and get the transaction data. So I can just copy that, I think. Yeah, so first we'll extract the data from the result and then map over all the edges and put the node ID. That'll give us an array of IDs. And then through those array of transaction IDs, we're going to map and call this get transaction data, which I can copy from up here. And this get transaction data, we'll take an ID and then we'll call Arweave transactions get data, and we want to decode it. So we'll decode it to a string, and then we'll parse that string. And that will give us all of the data objects of our pins. And now we can use a svelte template to list them. And I'm just going to pull that in. But basically, we're going to use the await directive and call get pins. And while they're loading, we'll do that. Then when they come in, for each pin, we're just going to show the name in the note for now. We could, because we have the lat long, could add like a link to Google Maps to show the map of where it's pinned. Maybe we'll do that if we have time. So let's give it a shot. So if everything's working, we should see loading, but we don't. So we got an error. Site does not have permission for this action. Get active address. Cool. So let's hit connect. So when we hit this connect button, it's going to set up permissions for our Arweave wallet. And one of them is to access the currently selected address and sign a transaction. So now that we have that, let's try it again. Okay. Let's see what we got now. Does not have the required permission for this action. Okay. Wallet dot get. Okay. I need to refresh. Read wallet is not defined. Okay. That's interesting. Oops. Start from the root. Connect. Okay. We're good. Okay. Okay. So it ran and we got some sort of unexpected error. So let's see what we got. You know what? I bet you I didn't give it a URL. Well, that's going to be a problem. Okay. So we need to give it our GraphQL URL. Right. All right. Well, we're running out of time here. Let's go back to the main, get my pins. Let's refresh. Okay. Loaded. Hmm. We got the URL, GraphQL. We're doing a post. We've got our query. Let's see. Let's do this. Do a little tap. It's weird. So we got our data, got our transactions, and they're not there. So probably what's going on is might have something wrong with this address. So let's just take that out for right now. See if that's the case. Okay. And we'll just get all the pins. Cool. Okay, so we just got to work on that address thing, but I know hopefully you can get the idea, and maybe that's something you can do, and also add the Latin long and maybe a link to the map. Would be kind of cool. So before we wrap up, though, I do want to show you one thing. So once you have your app built, right now, you can use this tool to actually deploy your app into the Arweave itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a wallet here in our um, virtual machine. And then we're going to install this tool called ARKB. And ARKB will allow you to load web applications or websites onto the Arweave itself. So this will allow us to actually run our app in the Arweave itself and as it writes to the Arweave. So kind of weird, um, but it's pretty cool. So let's check this out. So if we do arkb and we say gateway, so that it'll use our local gateway, localhost 1984, and our wallet key.json. And then we're going to tell it to deploy public. And public is our entire Svelte app. So we're going to tell it to deploy that and say yes. And it deployed it at this URL, which is cool. So if I command click it, I've got my app. And it's running on our little local Arweave. And if I create a pin, it's going to grab my location. Arweave rocks. Yay. Check in. It's going to request my wallet. So I'm going to do my password. And it's set to sign a transaction. It's going to sign the transaction. Yay. And then I'm going to go look at my pins, and I've got my transaction on the Weave. Pretty cool. So that's all I wanted to show today. There's a lot more to go through. That's just touching the surface, but there's the wallet, the local environment, the library, this ARKB tool. There's SmartWeave contracts on here. So SmartWeave, you can actually write with JavaScript or any language smart contracts and deploy them to the Weave. Profit sharing tokens, profit sharing communities. It's a whole new thing that is worth exploring. There's a whole setup of Open Web Foundry hackathons that's worth digging into if you're interested in building stuff for Arweave. And there's a huge amount of resources. The developer Discord is great. And then there's some projects out here that I provided links to in the README. ARGo is interesting. So if you deploy your app, obviously you don't want to give users some URL like this or that. What you want to do is give them a nice URL. ARGo will connect your DNS to a gateway, and then you can access your app with 8pin.com or whatever. And AR Verify is a tool that lets you make sure as an app that you're using verified users, real users, which is pretty cool as well. AR Drive is like the Dropbox version for the permaweb, and that's kind of neat too. So that's what I have. I hope you enjoyed this screencast. I know it was a little long, but I think it was pretty cool. Thanks again for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.